The morning after the ambush, Seoul seemed quieter than usual, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Inside the villa, the air was different too. It wasn't just the smell of fresh coffee and polished wood. It was something unspoken, a fragile calm after the storm. Joan stood by the kitchen counter, wearing one of the plain cream shirts given to her by the housekeeper. Her left arm was still bandaged from the glass cut, but she moved with her usual grace, stirring Minjun's porridge while humming a slow African tune. "Joan, is Appa still sleeping?" the little boy asked from the table, swinging his legs. "Yes, baby," she smiled. "Your dad had a long night. Let him rest." He nodded solemnly, pretending to sip his milk like a grown man. "You saved us yesterday. You're a superhero." Joan laughed softly. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who doesn't like to see people she loves get hurt." Minjun grinned. "Then I love you too." Her heart melted. "And I love you, little soldier." Han Junesio appeared minutes later, dressed in his usual black suit. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the same shadows. Joan served him coffee without a word. He sat, taking a quiet sip, then said, "You drive well under pressure. Most men in my organization can't do what you did." She smiled slightly. "That's because they think too much before acting. Me, I just trust my heart." He lifted his gaze to her, curiosity flickering. "That's dangerous in my world. And yet," she said softly, "it saved you." For a brief moment, silence hung between them. Heavy, unspoken, alive. Then Minjun broke it, waving his spoon in the air. "Appa, Joan said I can go to the park again." Junesio raised an eyebrow. "Did she now?" "Yes," the boy said, his mouth full of porridge. "Please, Appa, please." Junesio exhaled and looked at Joan. "You're a terrible influence." She smiled, teasing. "Children deserve sunshine, even Mafia sons." He almost smiled, almost. Later that afternoon, Joan drove them into the city. The sky was overcast, but Minjun didn't care. He ran across the grass at the park, chasing pigeons, laughing so loudly that even passers-by turned to watch. Joan sat on a bench nearby, her hands resting on her knees, eyes following the boy's every move. Han Junesio stood under a tree, phone in hand, but his gaze wasn't on the screen. It was on them. For the first time in years, he saw his son happy. Genuinely happy. He also saw the way Joan looked at the child. Patient, loving, fearless. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't trying to impress him. She simply cared. Something twisted in his chest. Something he hadn't felt since his wife died. He looked away, forcing himself to remember that softness was dangerous. But the more he tried to fight it, the more he found himself drawn to her. That evening, as they returned to the villa, a black SUV was already waiting outside. Out stepped a tall woman, stunning, sharp, and cold-eyed. Her lipstick was blood red, her black leather coat hugging her curves. Joan could tell instantly, this was no ordinary visitor. Han Junesio's expression darkened. "Hi Rin." She smiled, slow, deliberate. "Appa, you disappeared for 2 days. I thought something happened." Joan glanced between them. The way Hyrin said Appa wasn't innocent. It was intimate, possessive. "Who's this?" Joan asked calmly. Hyrin's eyes flicked over her with open disdain. I could ask the same. A new driver? Or something else? Before Joan could respond, Junesio cut in. "She works for me. That's all you need to know." The woman chuckled lightly, then turned her attention back to him. "I heard about the ambush. I told you that dealing with the Estock group was dangerous. You should have called me. I handled it." She stepped closer, her manicured hand brushing his sleeve. "You shouldn't have to handle everything alone." Joan clenched her jaw, pretending not to care. But inside, something burned, jealousy mixed with disgust. Minjun, sensing tension, grabbed her hand. "Joan, who is that lady?" he whispered. She bent down and said softly, "Someone who talks too much, baby." Dinner that night was uncomfortable. Hyrin had invited herself to stay. She sat beside Junesio at the long dining table, crossing her legs and laughing too loudly at everything he said. Joan sat quietly at the far end, helping Minjun eat. "So," Hai-Rin said, her tone dripping with arrogance. "You're from Africa? How interesting. It must have been hard, driving a taxi here." Joan smiled politely. "Hard work never killed anyone." "True," the woman purred. "But some people are better suited for simpler lives." Joan kept her cool. "And some people mistake cruelty for class." The room fell silent. Minjun giggled quietly. "Joan wins," he whispered. Junesio's lips twitched, though he didn't comment. Hai-Rin glared at Joan but quickly masked it with a fake laugh. "Such spirit. No wonder you keep her around." After dinner, when Minjun went to bed, Joan stepped outside for air. The night was cold, the moon sharp. She stood by the fountain, thinking of her home in Kenya. The warmth, the laughter, the smell of rain on red soil. Here, even the beauty felt heavy. "Do you always speak your mind like that?" She turned. Junesio was behind her, his hands in his pockets. "Only when someone deserves it," she said. "She's been my associate for years," he said quietly. "She helps manage business deals. But she doesn't understand boundaries." Joan raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe it's time you set some." He smirked faintly. "You're brave, Joan. Most people don't tell me what to do." "I'm not most people," she replied. Silence settled again, thick, electric. The sound of the fountain filled the gap between them. He took a step closer, his voice lower. "You remind me of her." Joan blinked. "Your wife." He nodded. "She was kind but fierce when she needed to be. You're the same." Her heart skipped. "And does that scare you?" He looked at her for a long moment. "It should." Their eyes locked, a storm brewing between them, words left unsaid, emotions they both tried to bury. Then, from inside the villa, Hai-Rin's sharp voice cut through the night. "Junse, you should rest. We have business early tomorrow." The spell broke. Joan stepped back, smiling faintly. "You'd better listen to your associate, boss." He watched her walk away, the corner of his mouth twitching in something that almost looked like a smile, and almost like regret. That night, Joan couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the way he'd looked at her. Not as his driver, not as an employee, but as something more. Dangerous, forbidden, real. And as the wind howled softly outside, she knew something was shifting in the house. Something even Hai-Rin's jealousy couldn't stop. Love was creeping in quietly, disguised as loyalty. And for a mafia boss who'd buried his heart, that was the most dangerous thing of all. The night had a strange kind of silence, the kind that comes before a storm. The moon hung low over Seoul, soft light touching the rooftops like a secret being whispered to the city. Joan sat by her window, unable to sleep. Her heart had been restless ever since that night at the park, when Han Junesio had carried Minjun to her arms and looked at her, as though she were the only calm in his chaos. She tried to tell herself it meant nothing, that he was her boss, that she was only there to take care of his son. But the more she tried to fight the thought, the more his image haunted her. The rare smile he gave Minjun, the way he loosened his tie and sighed after long nights, the quiet pain in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. She had seen men before, strong, charming, powerful men, but none like him. A man who had everything, yet walked around like his soul was half gone. At exactly 2 a.m., Joan heard footsteps in the hallway. She tensed, her instincts sharp from driving late-night streets for years. Then came a faint knock on her door. "Joan!" It was his voice. Deep, husky, tired. She opened the door carefully. "Boss? Is something wrong?" His face was pale, his shirt unbuttoned at the top, and his eyes heavy. He wasn't angry or cold this time. He just looked broken. "Minjun had a nightmare," he murmured. "He kept calling for you." Joan didn't wait to reply. She walked past him quickly and entered the boys' room. Minjun was sitting upright, clutching his blanket, tears still fresh on his cheeks. "Sure, Mummy's here," she whispered softly, sitting beside him. He immediately curled into her, his small hands gripping her shirt. Junesio stood at the door, watching silently as she soothed his son with words so gentle they almost melted the air. For the first time, he saw what real love looked like. Not the kind that demanded perfection or obedience, but the kind that healed. When Minjun finally fell asleep, Joan stood to leave. But when she turned, Junicio was still there, leaning against the doorframe. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You always know what to say." "It's not magic," she replied softly. "He just needs warmth. You've given him everything. Except that." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "You talk like you know what I've been through." "I don't," she said honestly. "But I know what loneliness looks like." Something shifted between them. A small, invisible bridge forming in the silence. He sighed and rubbed his temples. "I tried, Joan. I've tried to be both his father and his mother. But every time he calls someone mummy, I feel like I failed her. Failed them both." Her heart ached. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe you're not failing, Junicio. Maybe you're just healing the wrong way." He looked up at her, eyes glassy with unshed emotion. "And you make me forget the walls I built. I don't know if that's good or dangerous." Joan didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence between them said everything. Just then, the alarms blared. A sharp, mechanical sound that shattered the quiet. Red lights flickered down the hallway. "Get Minjun," he barked, instantly alert. Joan grabbed the boy and held him close. "What's happening?" "Fire." One of the guards shouted from the corridor. Someone broke into the garage and set it ablaze. Smoke began to fill the air. Joan covered Minjun's face with a blanket, guiding him through the corridor as Junicio led the way. His men rushed in different directions, shouting orders, trying to control the chaos. Outside, the flames had already swallowed 2 cars. The heat burned Joan's cheeks as she ran with Minjun in her arms. He was crying again, terrified, and she could feel his tiny heart pounding against her chest. "Don't look, baby," she whispered, shielding his face. Junicio was barking orders to his men, furious and desperate. "Get the security footage. I want to know who did this." But when he turned and saw Joan holding his son, something inside him cracked. She was standing there in her nightgown, her hair messy, smoke swirling around her, but she looked like strength itself. Minutes later, after the fire was contained, everyone gathered in the open courtyard. Minjun was trembling in Joan's arms, his small fingers still gripping her tightly. Junicio approached them, soot streaking his face. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were fixed on her. "You shouldn't have gone into danger," he said hoarsely. "And leave your son there?" she replied, her voice fierce. "Never." That broke something in him. He took a deep breath, then gently touched her arm. "You're shaking." "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice trembled slightly. He looked at her for a long time, then said softly, "No one's ever stood by us like this. You could have left. You didn't." "Because I care," she said simply. "For him, and for you." For a long moment, they just stood there. The burning garage behind them, the night air heavy with smoke and unspoken feelings. Then, slowly, he pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a passionate embrace. It was something deeper, desperate, broken, human. She didn't pull away. Later, when Minjun was asleep in Joan's room, Junicio stood outside her door again. "They'll come after me next," he said quietly. "Whoever did this. My enemies are getting bold." She looked at him, heart pounding. "Then you protect your son. That's what matters." He nodded. "And you, I'll protect you too." Joan's eyes softened. "You don't have to." "I do," he interrupted, voice low and sure. "Because for the first time in years, someone reminded me how to feel again." He turned to leave before she could respond, his shadow vanishing down the dim hallway. Joan stood there for a long moment, hand pressed against her heart, wondering what kind of danger and love she was walking into. The mansion smelled of burnt metal and old memories. The morning after the fire, gray smoke still curled lazily into the sky from the wrecked garage. Guards moved back and forth, cleaning debris and whispering to each other about who might have done it. Joan stood by the window in Minjun's room, watching the workers outside. The little boy was still asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling softly. She didn't move. She just kept looking out, her thoughts heavy. She had seen danger before. Working nights as a taxi driver in the cold streets of Seoul taught her about fear. Drunk passengers, robbers, rude men. But this was different. This wasn't random danger. This was targeted, planned, and deep in her heart, she felt the fire wasn't meant for the mafia boss at all, but for her. Han Juniseo was already downstairs when Joan walked into the dining hall. He was in a clean black suit, his hair still damp from the shower, his expression sharp. Around him, his men stood in silence. The atmosphere was heavy, like the calm before another storm. When he saw Joan, his gaze softened for a brief second. "How's Min-jun?" "Still sleeping," she said quietly. "He's shaken, but fine." He nodded, motioning for her to sit. "Eat something. You haven't since last night." She hesitated, then sat opposite him. The silence stretched between them until he spoke again. His tone cold now, the mafia boss returning to his shell. "I checked the security footage. The man who set the fire wore a mask, but he knew where the cameras were. It wasn't random. He was sending a message." Joan looked up. "A message? To who?" He stared at her. "That's what I'm trying to find out." Something about the way he said it made her stomach twist. There was doubt in his eyes, the kind that suggested he wasn't sure whether she was a victim or a key to something bigger. After breakfast, Joan went to check on Min-jun again. She found him sitting on the bed, staring at a toy car in his hands. "Mummy Joan," he whispered, "was that fire my fault?" Her heart broke. She knelt beside him and hugged him tightly. "No, baby. None of this was your fault." "But Daddy looked so angry." "That's just his way," she said softly. "He wasn't angry at you. He was scared. Scared of losing you." The boy looked up at her with wide eyes. "He loves you, you know?" Joan froze. "What?" "He looks at you the way he looked at Mummy before she went to heaven." Her throat tightened. She didn't know what to say, so she just kissed his forehead. Children had a strange way of seeing truths adults were too afraid to admit. By afternoon, the mansion had visitors. Men in suits, serious and tall, their presence screaming underworld. Joan stayed close to Min-jun, but her ears caught bits of conversation. "Boss, this isn't just a warning," one man said. "They're moving again. The Torah clan lost 3 men last night. Someone's trying to start a war." "Not someone," another corrected. "The Ghost Syndicate." That name made everyone go silent. Joan felt a chill down her spine. She didn't understand much about mafia groups, but the way the men's faces hardened told her this wasn't ordinary. Juniseo stood at the center of it all, calm but unreadable. "Find out who's leaking information. Someone in this house knew I'd be gone last night." Joan looked at him sharply. "You think someone inside?" He turned to her, his voice low. "I don't know, but until I find out, you don't leave Min-jun's side. Not for a second." That night, after putting Min-jun to sleep, Joan went to the kitchen to make tea. The house was quiet, too quiet. She poured hot water into a cup and stared at her reflection in the glass window. That's when she noticed a faint movement outside, near the garden. A shadow. Her heart pounded. She turned off the light to see clearer. The shadow moved again, tall, thin, wearing a hood. She grabbed the nearest thing, a metal pan, and crept toward the back door. The moment she opened it, the cold night air slapped her face. "Who's there?" she called softly. No answer. She took one step outside, then another. Suddenly, a hand shot out from behind the bushes and grabbed her wrist. Joan gasped, dropping the pan. Before she could scream, a rough voice hissed, "Keep quiet, or you'll wake the boy." She froze. "Who are you?" The man pulled down his hood. His face was half burned, one eye covered with a scar. "You don't remember me, do you?" She shook her head, trembling. "4 years ago," he said slowly, "you drove a black sedan from Busan to Seoul. There was a woman inside, bleeding. You never asked questions." Her heart stopped. She remembered. She had picked up a woman one rainy night, covered in blood, begging her not to stop. The woman had vanished the next day. What about her? She whispered. She was Han Junesio's wife. Joan staggered back, her breath catching. What? The man's voice turned harsh. You were the last person to see her alive. She didn't die in an accident like he thinks. She was running away from him. Before Joan could respond, a gunshot tore through the night. The man fell backward, blood spreading across his chest. Joan! She turned and saw Junesio running toward her, gun still smoking. Are you hurt? He asked, grabbing her shoulders. She couldn't speak. Her mind was spinning. He said your wife didn't die in an accident. Junesio's face darkened. Don't listen to a dead man's lies. But, I said don't, he barked, his voice trembling now. You don't know what that world does to truth. Joan looked at the lifeless body on the ground, then back at him. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes that scared her. Guilt. Later that night, as police came to take the body, Joan stood by Minjun's bed, watching him sleep peacefully. She could still smell the gunpowder in the air. Who was Junesio really? And why did that man say his wife was running away? Down the hall, she heard Junesio on the phone. His voice was low but fierce. Burn the footage, he said. No one must know she saw him. Joan's heart dropped. She saw him. He was talking about her. And that was when she realized the fire wasn't meant to kill Junesio. It was meant to scare her away before she learned too much. But now it was too late. She was already in too deep. The mansion had never felt so tense. Guards patrolled the hallways with silent eyes. Every window was shut, every curtain drawn. The scent of gunpowder still lingered faintly in the air, mixing with the sharp aroma of disinfectant the cleaners had used that morning. Yet even as everyone moved around pretending life had returned to normal, Joan could feel it. The heavy, invisible weight of something unspoken pressing against every corner of the house. Han Junesio had ordered the security footage erased before sunrise. He claimed it was for their safety, that the less anyone knew, the safer Minjun would be. But Joan wasn't convinced. She had seen the look in his eyes last night. Not fear, not anger, but guilt. Something dark lived behind those calm features. And now that she had seen it, she couldn't unsee it. She didn't sleep. Instead, she lay awake, listening to the faint hum of the night, Minjun's soft breathing beside her, and the echo of the dying man's voice in her mind. She didn't die in an accident. She was running away from him. The words replayed over and over, each time stabbing deeper into her chest. At dawn, she decided to get answers. She found Junesio in his study, standing by the wide glass window that overlooked the smoking remains of the garage. His posture was stiff, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn when she entered. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. You shot him, Joan said, her voice shaking but firm. That man from last night. You didn't even let him speak. I didn't need to. Yes, you did, she snapped, stepping closer. He said things I can't ignore. Things about your wife. Stop. No. You stop, she shouted, her voice cracking. I've stayed quiet. I've respected your privacy. But you can't keep pretending your past doesn't matter. If someone died, if your enemies are coming after us, I deserve to know why. The air between them burned with tension. Junesio turned finally, his eyes red. From lack of sleep. She died in an accident, he said tightly. That's all there is to it. Joan looked at him, her voice trembling. Then why did he know about me? Why did he say I drove her the night she died? For a moment, his expression froze, shock flashing across his face like lightning. Then, in a lower voice, he said, What did you just say? I was the driver, she whispered. 4 years ago, a woman bleeding, terrified. She told me to keep driving, no matter what. I didn't know her name, but now I realize it was her. Your wife. He stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. You were there? Yes. Her eyes filled with tears. And now I don't know what to believe anymore. He sank into the leather chair, running a trembling hand through his hair. For a long time he didn't speak. The silence was deafening. Then finally he said, She called me that night. She said she was coming home. I waited, and she never came. The police found her car burned down near the river. I buried her with what they found. He looked up at Joan, eyes glassy. You're telling me she never reached that river? Joan nodded slowly. She didn't. She was running. From someone. From something. He clenched his jaw. If she wasn't killed by accident, then who? Maybe the same people who burned your garage, Joan said quietly. Maybe they're not after you, Junesio. Maybe they're after the truth. Later that day, a new visitor arrived. An older man in a gray coat and dark glasses. The moment Junesio saw him, his expression hardened. Detective Park, he greeted coldly. Still calling me that? The man chuckled dryly. Even after I saved your neck more than once? Joan watched from the stairs, heart pounding. The detective's sharp eyes landed on her immediately. And you must be the driver. The one who saw everything. Junesio's voice cut in. She's not part of this investigation. Park ignored him. Did you notice anything strange about the woman you drove that night? Anything at all? Joan hesitated. She kept looking behind us. She said someone was following her. And she had a pendant. Silver, shaped like a tear. She wouldn't let go of it. Park's expression darkened. That pendant belonged to one of the Ghost Syndicate leaders' wives. She was supposed to be dead too. Joan blinked. What are you saying? I'm saying your boss's wife wasn't just his wife, Park said quietly. She was connected to the syndicate, and someone wanted to make sure she disappeared before she could talk. Junesio slammed his hand on the desk. Enough! Face it, Junesio, Park said, unfazed. You've been living a lie. Your enemies didn't kill your wife. Your family did, the same people you trusted. After the detective left, Joan followed Junesio to the balcony. He was silent, staring down at the courtyard where Minjun was playing with his toy car under the maid's supervision. Are you okay? She asked softly. No, he said bitterly. I built this empire thinking I was protecting him. But I might have been building his prison. She stepped closer, her voice gentle. You couldn't have known. He turned to her, eyes filled with pain. Don't defend me, Joan. Every person who's ever gotten close to me has either died or disappeared. I can't let that happen to you too. Then stop pushing me away, she said, her voice trembling. I'm not them. I'm not afraid of your world. You should be, he whispered. Maybe, she said softly. But right now, your son needs both of us. And whether you like it or not, I'm staying. For a long moment, he just looked at her, torn between fear and something deeper. Then he nodded slightly. Fine. But if you stay, you follow my rules. No going out alone. No strangers, no secrets. Joan nodded. Then promise me the same, no more lies, no more hiding. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. You've changed everything, Joan. And that terrifies me more than any enemy I've ever faced. Their eyes met, and for a moment time stopped. That night, when everyone slept, Joan went to the garage ruins. She knelt by the charred remains of what once was a car, the cold wind brushing her face. Something shiny caught her eye in the ashes, a half-melted pendant. Silver, shaped like a tear. Her blood ran cold. She picked it up and turned it over in her hand. There were faint letters engraved on the back. Not in Korean, but in English. J.S. My heart is yours, even in the fire. Joan's breath caught. The pendant wasn't just his wife's. It was a message. And now, holding it, she realized the truth was still burning. Buried under smoke, lies, and love too dangerous to ignore. The morning dawned quiet. Too quiet for a house that had lived through fire, bullets, and betrayal. The mist hung low over the mansion's courtyard, curling softly around the stone statues like ghosts. Joan stood by her window, clutching the half-burnt pendant in her palm. Its silver gleam caught the pale light, whispering secrets that refused to die. She hadn't slept. The truth she'd uncovered last night wouldn't let her. The pendant wasn't just a keepsake. It was evidence. And if Junesio saw it, everything would change. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. Downstairs, she heard voices. Heavy, low, and serious. the kind that only spoke when danger was near. She slipped the pendant into her pocket and made her way down, each step heavy with uncertainty. When she entered the study, the air was sharp with tension. Detective Park was back, standing opposite June SEO. Around them were maps, photos, and files, everything pointing toward one name that chilled her blood: the Ghost Syndicate. "They've moved again," Park said grimly. "3 of your warehouses in Busan are gone, and they left a message this time." He handed June SEO a small envelope. Inside was a single photo of Min-jun, taken from outside the school gate 2 days ago. Joan gasped, rushing forward. "Oh my God!" June SEO's fists clenched. "They're watching us." Park nodded. "They're coming for the boy. You're not the target anymore. He is." Within hours, the mansion turned into a fortress. Guards doubled. Cars were checked. The perimeter was sealed. Joan stayed close to Min-jun, never letting him out of her sight. The little boy sensed something was wrong, but she kept smiling, pretending everything was fine. "Will Daddy be okay?" he asked as they sat in the garden. "Yes, baby," she said softly. "Daddy's the strongest man I know." Min-jun leaned into her, his tiny voice trembling. "Mummy used to say that too." Her throat tightened. She was right. Then, out of nowhere, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of torn paper. "Mummy gave me this before she left," he whispered. "She said if I ever feel scared, I should give it to Daddy." Joan froze. "Can I see it?" He nodded, handing it to her. The paper was old, edges burnt. On it were just 4 words written in shaky English. "Trust the driver, Jay." Her hands trembled. Couldn't be. The note was from his wife, and it was meant for June SEO. Trust the driver. Her. Joan ran inside, her heart pounding like thunder. She burst into the study where June SEO and Park were still talking. "She knew me," Joan cried. "Your wife. She knew me. Before she died. She told Min-jun to tell you to trust me." Both men turned sharply. June SEO's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" She handed him the note. His hands shook as he read it. "Trust the driver, Jay." His lips parted slightly, his face draining of color. She was warning me." "Not warning," Park said quietly. "Guiding you." Joan stepped closer. "There's more. I found this in the ruins." She pulled the pendant from her pocket and placed it in his hand. "Your wife's." He turned it over, saw the engraving, and froze. "J.S. My heart is yours, even in the fire." His breath hitched. "She never called me Jace. She used that name only when..." His voice broke. "When she wanted me to know she was in danger." Park leaned in. "Then this pendant wasn't just a love token. It's a signal." June SEO's eyes widened. "Signal?" Park nodded. "The Ghost Syndicate uses engraved codes. Fire means betrayal from within. She was warning you that someone close to you, in your own circle, was the traitor." Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the house. The windows shattered, smoke filling the air. Screams echoed from the hallway. Joan grabbed June SEO's arm. "Min-jun." They ran through the corridors, coughing, dodging debris. The fire alarm wailed. Gunshots rang outside. The Ghost Syndicate had arrived. 2 of June SEO's men fell by the stairs. Joan covered Min-jun's ears as they ran toward the back exit. But when they reached the courtyard, a black van screeched to a stop. Masked men jumped out, guns drawn. "Get behind me!" June SEO shouted, pulling his pistol. He fired fast, precise, hitting 2 men in seconds. But there were more, too many. Joan crouched, holding Min-jun close. "Daddy's here, baby, don't look." One of the masked men grabbed her from behind, yanking her up. "Drop the gun or she dies," he barked. June SEO froze, eyes blazing. "Let her go." The man laughed. "You want the boy? Then trade the woman." Min-jun screamed. "Mummy Joan." Joan's heart raced. She could feel the cold metal of the gun pressed against her temple, the man's breath hot against her ear. "Don't!" she shouted at June SEO. "Protect your son." But he didn't move. His eyes burned with something raw: love, rage, desperation. Then, in one swift move, he dropped his gun, raised his hands, and took a slow step forward. "Take me instead," he said. "I'm the one you want." The man sneered. "Not today." Before he could fire, a single shot cracked through the air. The man's body jerked, and he fell, a bullet clean through his chest. Behind him stood Detective Park, gun smoking. "You two owe me again," he muttered. Junicio rushed forward, pulling Joan and Min-jun into his arms. "It's over," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It's over." Hours later, the police swarmed the mansion. The surviving members of the Ghost Syndicate were taken away. Firefighters worked through the night, putting out the last embers. Joan sat on the steps of the courtyard, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the dawn. She was exhausted, shaken, but alive. Junicio walked over, carrying Min-jun, who was asleep on his shoulder. He sat beside her silently. "Your wife tried to save you," Joan said quietly. "Even in her last breath, she thought of you and your son." He nodded, eyes glistening. "And she brought you to us. Somehow, she knew you'd be the one." Joan smiled faintly. "I didn't save you, Junicio. You saved yourself by learning to love again." He looked at her, his expression softening. "No," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You brought life back to this house. You made my son laugh again. You made me remember what warmth feels like." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And I don't ever want to lose that." Her heart fluttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying stay," he whispered. "Not as a driver, not as a caretaker, but as family." Tears filled her eyes. She looked at Min-jun sleeping peacefully and then back at him. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "For the first time in years. I'm sure of something." Joan smiled through her tears. "Then yes." As the first rays of sunrise broke over the horizon, they stood together, Junicio, Joan, and Min-jun. A family born not from perfection, but from pain, healing, and love that survived fire. The boy stirred and looked up sleepily. "Mummy Joan." "Yes, baby? Can we go for a drive?" Joan laughed softly, wiping her tears. "Of course. Let's go anywhere the road takes us." Junicio took her hand, and for the first time, his heart was quiet. No guns, no fear, just peace. And as they walked toward the sunrise, leaving the smoke and ashes behind, the world finally felt like it was theirs again. Fragile, beautiful, and free.
Hello, besties. In this story, we learned that true love isn't just about power or money. It's about care, patience, and presence. Even the toughest hearts can learn tenderness when a child's well-being comes first. One act of love can heal, protect, and change the lives of both parent and a child. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe, and share.